Hello, regarding the right and the left with American politics. Differences come countries A through Z. Nature's identity, its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that, the way it's a value/value progression. It shows us that its identity is what generates totally different species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And like, for example, birds and fish have two eyes. Therefore, it generates why and how we have black pupils, whites of eyes. Why and how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same exact time. Why and how it's teaching us about difference. It's showing us we are a different species body than other species body. It is showing us the difference at A through Z, individually grouped and together, all voicings for humanity and for those names and for the groupings of humanity have been self-guided roles through in that system syntactically ulterior from nature's uses of those groupings. It is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. It had shown the ancients need scientifically to discern it before the phenomenon of countries A through Z that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states, more probably and demonstrably. A criminal enterprise and or a transnational one realized it was going to get caught for something, for the method that demonstrably, for example, the languages were revealed to be taught other. They were and are being led by, they were led by how they are about how nature's identity is functional, being hyper invisible but still discernible, and with a method of checking. In other words, if we pay attention, we our founders we could observe bang algorithm. In other words, our founders' communications are replaced, and we are sensed right through our own without self-guided roles. Anyone who doesn't have self-guided roles, see, this is a certain type of victim/hyper victim. Made the names of the people, the scientists, to use a phrase from the Bible. There's a part in the Old Testament that says all one has to understand is right up to here, where the names of the people, the sciences, will come together. And the part that only to defend, and the part that comes before it. And I never heard anyone speak about that part. In other words, and it says that's the only part to defend. For example, I digress. There are World Trade Center predicate acts, but someone needs to be able to speak about predicate acts, but there were only 3 branches of government. In the locations, areas, and states have had self-guided roles with their own criminal, foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects, and natures. And the difference of that, or as not just them and the federal, even when they're not, the difference of when they are too. This breaching method uses all natures of difference, wherein how it measures and maintains the voices of locations, areas, and states, individuals, multi-front, hurt sickly distinctly from the voices of individual leaders, hurt in such a way, with only fathomed counters syntactically, are blaming other things, others, ourselves. For example, for negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and demonstration by nature itself, and by our founders. That and how and why everyone has self-guided roles, replacing what our founders communicated for us to understand clearer than day about how and why a breaching method reassigned with black pupils, whites of eyes are used to communicate by nature. And anyone not self-valued roles with that, which were checked by internationally monitored conversations, but also by our work criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, and way worse that no one fathomed, fluent through more than 13 states, which were entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, and with slavery sickly non-distinctly entrenched. Sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too. In other words, everyone was the only thing. James Madsion is the only founder we're directed to know the name of. It was communicated to us why and how. No one had no one had free speech, and everyone had to pretend other. And that was measured and maintained. Everyone was maintained an extent of collusion /S against themselves and against everyone else. And or that body was sensed, including that body was a majority of people, including if it was everybody. Connecticut has a Channel 3 news and their sources and the intelligence at their location, the difference of their guilt or the intelligence next to them. And then the federal, but it's also the same ones. And the difference of their guilt was this time collusion /S increasingly with all the different countries in the news. And their family members and their extended family members at corners of streets, people associated with the Witness Protection Program, people involved with overt criminal enterprises and terrorists in the news at the same time, child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced years apart, the families involved with that. All badios, which is a term I invented to replace BS. I donated it to everyone. Everyone feel free to use it. Because we need to have the emphatic. Otherwise, we would have black people's whites of eyes. And one person with anger, totally legit, would have fixed the whole world. The whole world doesn't know how to speak about the breaching method. The whole world is blaming other things, others, ourselves, for what nature itself and America's founders, but not just America's founders. Not just America's founders wanted us to know clearer than day. There were houses that were designed, that are still standing, that were designed before America's founders were born. They have replaced what our founders communicated about that. The suburbs were designed tactically denatured to be a landscape theater, to have nature demonstrate with negative value nature progressions acts in nature, only capable of being more and more. This preaching method understands and measures and maintains all roles, not fathoming. Syntax, nature, syntax to tactical ulterior. Appreciation through and as systems individually grouped and all humanity voicing tactical ulterior from what could defend those principles treatments and afford natures. You don't leave out black people's whites of eyes. This is principle. You don't have black people's whites of eyes and then have some math guy tell you guys relativity is a theory. Meanwhile, they're totally species bodies made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And by having our own species body of a whole bunch of individual bodies, we can discern what's not us nor them, but is all things anyway. Is generating all group differences, which is part of what we have to hold on to with discernment of what we can discern. We have means to discern. There's a hyper-foreign breaching method. So to speak, there are hyper-foreign, criminally foreign influenced, hyper-criminally foreign influenced, criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments. Boolean logic roles to measure and maintain. Roles with differences and exceptions. Self-value used as systems tactical ulterior from its own, which is exceptions in exception nature. Always, and not faked. They're only capable of faking, in other words, and differences. I'm one of the people that was in the Ninth Circuit Court as an observer, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before they were attacked, and the night before, with a hotel and like spots next to it. And I noted people involved with that. I also recorded. I didn't know their names, and I had never seen them yet. But there were people involved with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, before the World Trade Center attack in Connecticut. And they had collusion /S from people who were also involved in New York, interstates, as people a number of ways internationally involved, but also hyper international involved. Did various departments and programs with Central Connecticut State University, like the International Business Program. They have foreign and domestic military still involved with the World Trade Center predicate acts with Connecticut news locations in their sources that increasingly have predicate acts with the same house /S involved with people from other areas and with themselves too, with poisons on all sides of my house and on my property and on other people's property through time, and the difference of that and guilt with that. Also with their educators, and increasingly foreign and domestic military since I was a kid with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. They're involved intercities and in Wethersfield with proven child abusers, leaders, and kids' first force roles. A whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital with the intelligence community, New Britain's hospital. Those campuses. They never stopped having the overt criminal enterprises. But why is there a witch trials place next to Webb House? Now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And then and now they're still communicating other for that place and for our founders. Then they directed us to communicate for themselves. Like, and two, why and how? The only one of them we know the name of specifically is James Madsion. But we also know President /Chief. If we pay attention, nature shows us that every single Native American, even ones who didn't agree and didn't even know about the plan of James Madison, they are our founders. They helped with not just with resistance. It's resistance and damage control that made America's difference. Where each country has a difference. Like, I don't want to say Confucius because I don't know about Confucius. I know like there's principles with it. I mean, they would show us things like we learn about a little bit about each culture. And then people say, oh, come here and come there and to learn about it. But everyone leaves out Black people's way to buy. Everyone leaves out, like right here on YouTube, we can deal with principles. We can dealt with principles properly. Just little kids throughout America gather the means and the energy and the momentum to help Native Americans do things that they couldn't fathom. But any country tries to do things like that, for themselves. The breaching method will exploit that through other people because it already has everyone locked, not just because of the economy. They'll know how that country's A through Z. They know they could have all these problems and the whole thing could go over the economy. But meanwhile, words and economies our systems totalitarian from our means. We're not supposed to keep taxing ourselves and charging ourselves money for things that we could have had way better, like water. In other words, it's a difference between saying, oh, well, it has to be private or it's not free market. When has there been a free market? How many private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises, originally still terrorists? Same time collusion with the interbranch. They needed to hide the same sequence shifts, actually core recorded value of the nature of their debate. Also, discernment. All of a sudden, since the World Trade Center attack, extremism. Everyone's using extremism and radical tactical terror from how the ancients would have taught about why and how the sciences share an identity, where and how they appear not to. It comes with how it teaches about how it is and how things are hyper additional nature. And some other words, please get me off the fake conversations with WFSB and their sources. Get them onto paper, including the interbranch ones, before and after the World Trade Center attack. Before it, WFSB recorded that. The second they recorded that, a bunch of people involved with intelligence next to the network locations have rules of wire crime acts and methods, and police departments that have connections to each other, and Wethersfield police that faked the conversations with me, and me being there as a kid, and now as an adult. They're putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to little kids with foreign and domestic medical families too. These are real sick fake punks putting fake transcripts and databases through the mail, but they won't communicate with people directly because they have a bunch of fake punk things, fake conversations. Then they have conversations about nothing, lying. They just change it for fake what they actually communicate. When they actually do communicate, they say nothing. In other words, so Hartford Hospital has rules with a Mayano house next to them, per Jonathan Mayano, and with a Demorals Market, and with a Aiello's Kitchen associated with spots, and with a whole bunch of other people with the businesses and houses next to Hartford Hospital, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, in hundreds of different countries, and their rules with campuses in ways they don't even know. They know to an extent, though. They had collusion /S, and with differences rackets, and they're influenced to pretend fake motivations for why, and like their time when they're going to say things, who's going to be there. For a long time, they have been systems tactical terror from natures, where it is positive, not as criminal insidious natures are positive. Like criminal insidious natures of peace at A through Z, countries A through Z. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature to cause negative attitude questions, acts of nature. While everyone was just going about blaming, ignoring how we've been systems other and speaking it, anyway. The breaching method was making everyone build what it propagated only allowed to be. The cities the way they are, for example, clearer than day, while the suburbs were designed with slavery, a torture, extortion mess. You guys jump into, that people jump into these conversations dishonestly. But what people don't realize too, the reason we all see that only projected is because they just ignore people and or they're faking and changing at the same time what they say. They exploit the phenomena, how people, the people that are putting people in classes and giving their reasons for it from backgrounds that no one's paying attention to. This preaching method uses that criminally foreign influence tactic, these illusions wrong. There are only 3 branches of government. Forgiveness is because to discern the breaching method, there are collusions. That's one of the things, even if they're made up, the witch trials placed next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, is about simultaneously while being about why and how. They're still communicating other for that place and for our founders, plural, that directed us to understand. The only name that we could know, that was one of their founders, was James Madsion. And why and how nothing would have been without his plan to force the rest of the founders. And because they wanted us to understand why and how, no one could say their actual motivations, or they would have been sensed through our own, as humanity A through Z, as the styles, as roles with everything. They were not just internationally monitored; those were individually grouped in together. The countries involved with that. This breaching method extorts, tortures, and enslaves grouped differences, all fact-cheating nature-wise, therefore physically. See, Native Americans were already a unity. And James Madison's plan, through president/chief and through other means, we could discern they got a portion of the Native American to want us to, get the Constitution unabridged. Appreciated why and how we have rights are too numerous yet to have to list them, let alone with interbranch attaching us to fake conversations with themselves and others, putting fake transcripts in databases, and with the federal and the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices of Connecticut has roles with the World Trade Center attack. A bunch of people tied to a detective Samuda with Central Connecticut State University and a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, have roles with child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, and the families involved with that through other natures of organized crime acts and methods, like falsified police reports roles, switching and forging names too, and with arrays of falsified police reports for the same arrests, per methods that are recorded that are valued as predicate acts methods. See, but there are only three branches of government. So everyone shouldn't pretend it's hard to understand when someone says they attached me to fake conversations with the police as a kid, now as an adult. They're lying about their motivations too. Increasingly, there's a dawn on the conch. I never had a picture. There are proofs that they maybe took a picture of me standing near her for a second. Increasingly, she has collusion with predicate acts with people from other areas I never saw in my area of my life. In other words, there are proofs that these people have something to do with nuclear too, because of the roles with NASA, with Russians and Americans, with the names at Harvard Hospital next to it, involved with wire crime acts and methods, openly with the hospital, and with the Facebook pages of Wethersfield police. A whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Schumack are people from Wethersfield schools, and recorded, and people involved with child abusers, leaders of kids years apart. People involved with hate groups like KKK theme, Black theme, Latino theme, intercultural, and interreligious spots. They have a Joshua Schumack and his mother involved with the Facebook page of Wethersfield Police with retired police chiefs. And they didn't even go to my campuses. These are people that weren't even in classes with me, that are increasingly involved with people that have been collecting evidences on my street and with intercities, with the campuses that I went, and people associated with the campuses and the leader and their families and ties to them. They were brought up their roles with untimely deaths on and off Trinity College, that were brought up at the same time with murders and with untimely deaths and all these different natures of confessions and links between people that were also involved. I didn't tell them that, but before the World Trade Center attack, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, had roles with his co-defendants in a deposition, which was going to be taken outside of a court, but a court offered my father means to have the deposition there as a trick, though, because people that work with that court and their intimate ties, foreign and domestic military, they were planting there. I caught them with predicate acts before and after the World Trade Center attack, with people when I was a kid too. Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, has rules with a whole bunch of different countries and names with the intelligence families that are homeland that have roles with them as a little, identity theft, fraud, slanders roles, but everyone's speaking through others, which is relative to where and how they got away with this so long. Even though they have timed uses of names next to the families, next to the campuses, just repeating fake things. They run into high line progressions too at Harvard Hospital and with other triages because of the mental health care side and their roles with other natures and methods of predicate acts that were effectively used to influence their syntax regarding legislation, regarding all value treatments, regarding all time treatments, subject treatments. See, they would have been other, but campuses A through Z have collusions with their difference to exploit it, self-value through themselves, though, or sensing for the breaching method. Otherwise, it would have brought up why how no one had free speech. It wasn't about a tea tax. Meanwhile, there was slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. So we have the sense and sensibilities of the people around us forced to entertain. Originally and still, the complete possession / hyperpossession of roles with names that individually grouped and together. Through and as all humanity voicing as through and as systems tactile terrier from its own. And it's been demonstrating to that by having been that way. And that's more and more being self-valued by people because they're actively needing to pretend that integrity spoke. People spoke for principles properly. You guys were child abused at campuses A through Z. Please, too, Mr. Cuomo, if you could contact former Governor Malloy, tell him don't be scared. I won't blame him at all. I understand that they played him with the principal upskirt nature. And there's a Leahy family that put me in fake conversations with themselves. And I had a couple words, but not like she pretended. And she stole what other kids said to pretend that behavior on me. One of our guy, when he was a kid, though, he's one of the ones involved with the Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation has people with the intelligence community, federal agencies, and their family members and things like that. Through administrations used criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. Forgiveness is because these are the type of things we're going to have to examine because they had time collusions with a whole bunch of different other countries, other ones involved with the news. All of the suits and ties, counters, the exceptions, as an array, as collusion, /S, with sense and sensibilities, to use Jan Austin's phrase, sensing for the hyperforeign breaching method. That using, So please, get me off the fake conversations with WFSB about the World Trade Center attack. They are making confessions and communicating a lot of things that way. A whole bunch of people tied to people named Scalora. A whole bunch of intimate ties to a Scalora family per people making confessions with them. And it was confirmed other ways. In other words, a Subby Scalora, a Claudia Scalora, that were increasingly with extended family members in my area involved with intelligence families, with interbranch forging and switching names, increasingly collusion /S. And again, even with child abusers, leaders, and kids first forced years apart, overt criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time, and names that next to the campuses, long time involved with them, leading up to the World Trade Center attack. In it and since collusion /S with a whole bunch of people with their cousins and ties to them, increasingly the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, and the difference of guilt there, or as names next to it, or just traveling by it. And they don't even realize where their guilt is with that. This is where people's subject treatments, name treatment, when they want to figure things out. This is a breaching method that has been playing your guys' kids, but through your own. See, the only three branches of government that ever shown they need to hide life aggression. The difference of their guilt or the intelligence tied to them, which never stopped being used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions raw. Right through wars, the sides killing each other have had collusion /S with these predicate acts methods and natures of organized crimes rolls through that. The counters to ICE and ICE have collusion /S with themselves per hyperforeign. It is concentrated at and next to Harvard Hospital, even if that's made up in their intelligence families with the Los Solitos themed and the other criminal enterprises themed and names and narratives tied to it, including journalists and their family members from Central Connecticut State University in Britain, Connecticut, is increasingly involved with planting evidences, fake motivations, fake timing, sequence shifts, and roles with investigators, and their family members along Franklin Avenue, along Route 3, in conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices, along Route 175 from the founding locations, like the Witch House place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. See, there's a possession slash hyper-possession over the nature of subject treatments, let alone over the nature of debate slash debates. They contain quality aspects of nature, making confessions to a breaching method at country's A through Z. Now, you guys making these confessions too while pretending other. Like when you guys pretend that right or left, Republican, Democrat, the difference of that. And there's nothing, or when you guys pretend, oh, well, he's trying to criticize me. This is what is all recorded when you guys replace black people's rights of eyes. What nature communicates simultaneously too. What our founders communicated about how the breaching method only allowed roles with it reassigned. And relative to all kinds of things, because nature was just demonstrating with that. For example, we are being used as systems tactile terror from the one that nature uses to show us as the smallest finite detail left out are being used for a system tactile terror from its own, relative to its uses of positive and negative treatments. It's showing us that plant cells, for example, their cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall /S, even if it's not, as three different identities of relationship to its complete identity, each cell, and them sharing the cell wall's life, but also gases in their mixture, positive or negative note to the cell, and water and its elements, note positive or negative to the cell. Nature is communicating about positive and negative, and it never stops showing us its difference, inseparable from all things as them. Even if something is made up like art, it is distinctly the finite and or the order of the finite, from how it is the active and or the grouped, and or how it is the progressive and or simultaneous. It is everything it uses to show us the hyper simultaneous to an extent. And where it comes with its complete, wherever we could discern it to an extent, it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. And we could ignore it and be systems tactile-theory and all agree about it, but we'll only demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, nature's finite, grouped, active, and increasing. This breaching method assigned roles with systems, and as the humanity voicing the system altogether, countries individually grouped and all together, and assign them to roles with identities of integrity only capable of defending that syntactically by keeping other things, others, ourselves, being blamed for those negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, even when correctly. And while they're doing that, they're valuing it as having been. So in other words, black people, like, think about how long they took to discuss money, fix it, and then get the money afterwards. If you can't afford it with the money, we don't know how to fix it because the money, you pay them free. You fix the pipes if they have, and how they have or have, and even the slightest impurity, let alone lead in it, in Michigan, for example. You have to see it as a worse than a war zone at country's A through Z. We lost the Revolutionary War on many fronts. We still don't even have our founders. We have things pretended debatable that are not debatable. And where and how that's gotten away with. That's all that's needed by this breaching method. There are offensively only three branches of government predators. It will change and the people will be healed, including at the branch of government. If you got spell mandated law for them in the Wethersfield Police, the Britain Superior Court, Harper Court, they have an officer Hunter as one of the ones involved with the Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with Harper Courts people and New Britain Superior Court people, and their sexual and their differences and things like that. In other words, too, I think this guy he was like sexually came on to me, Officer Hunter. He has rules with spots associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luck, co-defendants, and others with the Mark Twain House in the Harry Beecher Stowe House, in conjunctions to the state capital of Connecticut. Now they're leaking this also with silence, and their motives are being used where they can get in trouble for that as their motive. That's not their motive. Like with John Maiano, a whole bunch of people tied to John Maiano, people with the name Casper, people involved with those buildings, people with the name Carone, they're educators involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and families involved with the child abusers, leaders of the kids. Also brought them in with their confessions and demonstrations. These are also people involved with all investigators, all sides of criminal and civil cases. And the interbranch and intelligence already locked the same predicate acts with facts, collusion, /us with the crime scenes and with names next to it. The difference of their guilt, their educators, their neighbors, their family members. This breaching method has that manifest. This breaching method is manifest to us as a demonstration of use of all locations /s everywhere the species body is. Now we're gonna look at all that's connected to the suits and ties, counters and exceptions, sensing for the breaching method, because even those things are inseparable from where and how we have black pupils, whites of eye. And child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, first force, because they have roles with predicate acts with facts methods. One of the things that witch trials are about, even if they're made up. And note, there's a witch trials place next to Webb House. Again, renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And that's where George Washington had to come right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War and to counter-extort. They had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. They wanted that explained to ourselves. They couldn't tell the rest of the Native Americans about the plan. They couldn't tell the rest of the founders, the rest of the presidents about the plan. The experts are leaning on experts. They're torturing the president sickly distinctly from the other individuals. All natures of leaders. Individually grouped and together, there is syntax entertained. It can't entertain itself without valuing it, having been since some ancient time. Prepare our minds, all looks on the future. Defense, everything, the best answer comes from being led by that which is hyper invisible but still discernible. And generating not just our species body, is generating all differences as its own. To an extent, we can discern it. And again, that extent comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, equally value, and the value of that, three ways equally increasing as value, as we'll observe. The Trinity in Allah's name. There are proofs that these are preservations of unabridged, what requires unabridged syntax nature. Therefore, physics to appreciate properly. English and the other ancient languages were revealed to be led by that, by how it is functional, how the sciences appear not to share an identity, but they do anyway. Nature itself uses grouping, therefore, to demonstrate itself in ways greater than and more finite than the ways that math does. See, the economists at countries A through Z, they're going about, business as is and things like that, and we rely on the maths, and they said that was legal. No one's being led by what is true always, as we have means to be. And so they still have the collusion / us that our founders demonstrated are being used as a breaching method, but through ourselves. We're the private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises, and interbranch and terrorists. At the same time, they're kept needing to hide the same sequential, and roles, styles, replacing our founders' communications, sensing for the breaching method together, pretending needing to pretend their motives, or how they need to hide their roles with their families on off the campuses together, and how really they are together. They've been speaking about crimes together. They've been with the elements of crimes to counter it, but as collusion / that's including with the borders and the border states, including when they pretend that they're passionately attacking someone because they criticize ICE, or passionately attacking someone for defending ICE. The differences of the guilt of ICE or of the overt criminal enterprises. The agencies have roles with all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes with psychiatry, also tactically delusions raw, all kinds of wire and mail crime acts and methods, and collusion / S also so long manifest with the difference of their guilt there, or their roles with the names of people associated with the intercities and interstates and internationally, with the houses and businesses next to them through time, as the ones also on off the campuses acting behind people's backs. I mean, or not, and the difference of that too explained. We can observe that too. Off campuses, tied to people from off campuses, sticking predicate acts and influences to roll self-value with it. They're putting whole fake things in campuses, categorically exploiting that, lying about their motivations, even though they are real ones increasingly like their kids' involvements with the same schools. In other words, please, Mr. Cuomo, please get former Governor Malloy. There are more people with the psychiatry, with Maine University, where he's involved people with the psychiatry, involved with Harvard Hospital, people from Maine, too, and their doctor, or a girl that was undercover pretending to be a patient, or a student pretending to be a patient, and her doctor, and their syntax. They make it look like I was involved with the conversation. In other words, they have all kinds of identity. A whole bunch of people run into high lab regressions by being patients, a whole bunch of people with fire departments. At the same time, collusions with people from Russia, people from Ukraine, people from Pakistan, people from Italy, people from, Puerto Rico, all-time collusion / us with Wethersfield Police Chief too, retired, and with the same house. With people Colo involved with the games, with the poisons and things too. Even if that wasn't them, with the spot under my tree that's there now all of a sudden. A tree I box at sometimes. There's also people that the day before President Trump was shot, one of the guys shot at me with a pellet gun. It hit the grass near me. I heard it. In other words, they're searching for cover-ups because those are prosecutors and judges that have recorded themselves with predicate acts on my street and with their Facebook pages and uses of their kids and their roles personally and professionally, judges and prosecutors, with a bunch of foreign and domestic doctors and their kids, involved with all kinds of predicate acts on my street with people from other areas, involved with untimely deaths with them, all kinds of collusion / us with crime scene and with the news locations and with their sources. The FBI has collusions with WFSB and WTNH sources all along Route 175 from Old Wethersfield. Chris Walters sought me out to record from Charlie Bowes and others with his family have roles with judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic military families involved with Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University and the intelligence families next to them. Also with people on my street in Wethersfield, involved increasingly with falsified police reports with them and with child abusers, leaders of the kids, and kids that didn't even go to my school who had collusions with predicate acts with facts in the databases and then pretending as ones that didn't even go to my, that did go to my school and have classes with, increasingly tied to my neighbors, intelligence families that have roles with the police, fabricating police reports, switching names, forging names, rules of wire crime acts, whole methods of them, including mixing in totally fake phone transcripts, changed ones. Same thing with the digital. These are also increasingly a bunch of ways, roles with whiting forensics since I was a kid. Increasingly whiting forensics in the state prisons and the corrections offices and judicial branch offices. Increasingly collusions with body dumping spots, totally different killers reported. Those people personally and professionally involved with predicate acts and with the gangs, with the interbranch, refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Predicate acts methods intercities, so they can pretend they don't understand people, pretend they have that they're legitimately pretending that people don't want to cooperate with the police. They're lying about why they think that I don't want to cooperate with the police. I'd be a moron to cooperate with the police. They faced conversations with me as a kid and I was an adult. They both fake lies to me as a kid and I was an adult, and as World Trade Center predicate acts rules. Please, Mr. Cuomo, get Wethersfield Police on paper. Watch what I caught them doing interstates. There's a bunch of people tied to a Fred Grisey involved with the FBI and the family members of prosecutors and judges involved with foreign and domestic medical families, with sexual medical offenders, and then the roles with that use of that. A whole bunch of people tied to a modern pastry with a Mayano family, too, and with a Fred Grisey as the ones involved with also Mazzucato bakeries, something to do with bakeries. In other words, and people with the FBI and the courts and the police forms, retired police chiefs, putting fake things in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to people. A bunch of people, in other words, intercities, they're refusing to identify themselves. There's an officer name, they use the name Darth Vader with the phones at Trinity College, involved with some sexual medical offenders of kids, untimely deaths in Wethersfield, and there at the same time brought up people involved with murders. And all this was cover-ups because I caught them doing things intercities and interstates and intercampuses and intracampuses and with abuses of the kids, of the leaders of the kids. Specifically have them abuse other people's kids and other people. In other words, like a Dean Judd and his kid were forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to collusions with interbranch family members in foreign countries and their intimate ties with foreign and domestic. All kinds of differences, their own uses of their own differences, other people's differences, including their sexual differences and their cultural differences, all natures of culture, which have been taken apart from what all distinct natures of culture are in demonstration of, which is that shared hyperculture. Again, that generating all differences. Otherwise, generating means for us to discern. We're using systems tactical theory from its own, with how it appreciates our questions and our answers, too. Ugh. So, interbranch originally still all offensively telling people, there are only three branches of government. We're going to examine how, especially like in New York City, some ways, offensively, they're telling the people they can't trust the police. In other words, but they don't know how to speak it properly because they came through campuses that were placed with our founders and with nature itself need communicated for themselves to them. You see, they have that what they needed to have communicated to them. They have it replaced. They have that punk game with the word homework and all these excuses. We're going to examine the / hyper trap we're in at A through Z. Here, Anthony, Boxings, but makes all shush to hear, all shadow box. Some pace, at least, some try. Some rest, I taught that so many ways. Boxing.